Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I just played a couple minutes ago, where I managed to actually get a very good win in a position where I was winning, but it was complicated, and the game ends off with a very nice tactic, which I think is just very pretty. So let's just get into it. I start off the game with d4, and my opponent decides to go with d5, and I play what I've been playing over the past year at this point, maybe even over a year at this point. It's been so long since I started this opening, but I've been playing bishop f4, which is a London system. My opponent goes e6. I simply go e3, and my opponent goes knight f6, transposing to the main line. Of course, you can do some other things, like if you want to be different, you can play knight e7, but this is obviously stupid. My opponent decides to go knight f6, and I play knight d2, and my opponent goes with the move bishop to d6, which I'm trying to really figure out if this was good for me or not, and I ended up just realizing, okay, well, bishop d6 is a little bit off. I know, of course, in the London system, you're supposed to play c4 if they block their c-pawn. They haven't really done anything with the knight or the c-pawn yet, so I don't really know what I'm going to do. So I just no-brain this, and I go bishop g3, which is, of course, very reasonable. Of course, the idea is after taking, I would be opening up my rook, and this would be a very good position for me. There are some other lines here, like you can play this and go for a line with this, but I don't like those positions very much, doubling your pawns for no reason. You can also go, I think bishop g5 is another move in these positions, but either way, bishop g3 is what I chose. My opponent castles, and I go knight gf3, and now my opponent finally shows his cards of what he's going to do with these two pieces, and my opponent chooses one of the worst moves that he could choose, and it already gives me a very nice advantage. My opponent here really, what he has to play, he has to play c5. He has to play c5. He just has to go after my center, which is what you normally do in these positions. It's just how you're supposed to play the game, and he should have done this. I don't really know why he didn't do this, actually, because this is the most logical move to me, and as 2300 almost is what he is, he probably should know a little bit about the London, and the c5 is a very natural move here, but instead he chooses the move knight to c6, which is bad. This is bad, and the reason why this is bad is because now this allows me to play c4 myself, and after a little bit of thought, kind of psyching myself into it, I go with the move c4, which is the best move in the position. And the idea of this move, the idea of c4 is that, okay, now I'm putting pressure on his center. I'm going to play probably rook c1 at some point. I'm going to play a3. And why is this good now that he's blocked his c-pawn? It's because with his c-pawn unblocked, first of all, he can play the move c6 and really solidify his center. That's a line. But he can also be a little bit aggressive, and there's some lines that after c4 my opponent can play c5 and kind of blow open the center, and usually those complications turn out well for black. But c4 here is good, and my opponent wastes another move. My opponent goes with the move a6. And the point of a6 is that black doesn't really have any moves. Like, this is a very tricky position to play for black, because if we're really looking at this realistically, it looks like black can't really make a move. Like, see, let's flip the board. Make a move for black. Make a move for black here. This is very difficult. You can't take here, because that would simply open up my rook, give me an even better position. Rook e8 doesn't really look like it's doing anything, because this push doesn't really make any sense due to the fact that this pawn is going to be weak in all lines. If you play this move, I mean, I don't know really where the bishop is going. I can probably just play this move, force your bishop back, and maybe I'll have a better position there. I can clamp down on your position. This is kind of tricky. If I was playing black, I probably would just play a random move like h6 and get into a worse position here, because this is very tricky. My opponent goes a6 though, which is a really interesting try. Of course, he's trying to play b5, which is one of the only sources of counterplay he has. Well, really what he's trying to do is takes and then play b5 and then bring the bishop out to the b7 square and get on this diagonal, which would be a good idea, except for the fact that it doesn't really work. Like it doesn't really work. Like, I don't have to do anything. Like, computer's top engine choice is just to play the move a3, and if my opponent goes down into this line and goes for this b5 idea, which is obviously his idea, now bishop d3, bishop b7, and white is already getting all the pieces in. Like, every single piece is developed. White's going to castle next, and there's pressure on the king, which is everything you want in London. This is like a London player's dream, right? So I would have been very happy with that position. But instead of playing a3, I kind of mix up my theory a little bit, and I play something that I thought I knew decently well with the move bishop takes d6, which of course is not a move that normally comes to mind. But the reason why I played it is because I thought that this was some theory of mine, which is not really a good choice. Normally, you should think and not use your memory in a chess game. But either way, I do the wrong thing here. The line that I was remembering was a little bit different. The line was this knight f6, e3, knight c6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop d6, takes, c5. This is the line that I was thinking of, and here taking is actually one of the better moves, but I'm sure that the difference here is the fact that this knight in this line is on c3, and the knight in the line that I end up getting after, where are we? After bishop takes d6 is on d2, which I probably should have realized, and my opponent surprised me anyway here. I thought he was going to take back with the queen, and then I would have figured something out. Maybe I would play a3. Maybe I was going to continue to go play c5. But my opponent takes back with the pawn, which is the best move, but it's kind of tricky to figure out why. I guess the point is that he's trying to take here and go back into the center like this. But I wasn't really too sure. He might be trying to like make this happen too, but it doesn't really make too much sense if you're really looking at this properly. So I wasn't too scared of this move, and I thought, okay, well, what I can do, I can make this super boring by playing like c takes d5, knight takes d5, and I could take the whole center like this with e4. This is a line that I was thinking of. It's takes, e4, but I was just not sure that this was any good for me because I felt like my center was a little bit loose. If my opponent goes here and I get g3 off, yes, I thought white was probably slightly better here, but of course my opponent's not going to do that. They're probably just going to go back to f6, and it feels like I haven't accomplished anything. Like now I have to go bishop d3, maybe I go a3 here so the knight can come in, and then I go bishop d3, but of course black is slightly better here just because my center is really weak. So instead of that, I just played a very calm move. I played move a3, simply stopping my opponent's knight from coming here on any lines, and if this move I always have b4, right? Like that seems like a move that can't be too much of a problem, but I'm already giving my opponent an advantage. But what if I tell you this is my last inaccuracy of this game? This is the kind of the second last bad move, but this is basically my last bad move of this game. Everything else I think is a very, very good move that I played. My opponent goes bishop d7. I figure out what to do here, and I play the move bishop to d3 because I thought it made sense. Okay, I'm putting my bishop on this diagonal. That's where it wants to be. And if he was going to take here, I was thinking about taking back with a knight, actually, so that my bishop wouldn't move twice. And if he plays this now, then my knight can get to this square. I've tricked him, right, because that's where my knight wanted to be anyway. But now I already have it supported by another knight here, and I don't have to waste another tempo. So I thought that was a cool line, and my opponent decides to go into it. D takes c4, knight takes c4, and my opponent goes directly into this line with the move d5. I believe that he missed this move knight c to e5, and I already think that white has a pretty strong advantage here, even though the computer just says equal, equal, equal 100% of the time, because, well, it just feels like white has the better squares. White has this square on lock. This square is kind of taken care of by the bishop. Like, I don't really have to care about this. Whenever I want, I can grab his light squared bishop. I don't really want to, though. And I was just very, very happy with my position here. Knight takes e5. I take back with the knight because I thought this made the most sense. Yeah, taking back with the pawn is another move that I thought made some sense, but I just wasn't too sure how to evaluate this position. Like, I castled now. Maybe I have knight d2 in the future. I don't know. Like, it feels like we're kind of in like an Oreo shape, like something that the position can come to is something like this, with like this Oreo of pawns in the center. I just was unsure if this was any good for me or not, so I decided not to go for it, and instead I took back with the knight. My opponent goes rook to c8. I simply castle my king because it can't really be a bad move. I'm just getting my king out of danger, and I can bring my rook to the c file in the future. Something else strange in this position is that my computer is making a lot of noise right now, and I really hope that it stops. I hope you can't hear it either, because that would be an issue. Either way, something that's actually interesting in this position is that it feels like my bishop is slightly better than his bishop at all times, because he has a lot of pawns on light squares, right? and my bishop already has a target of the king, so it feels like my pieces are better placed than my opponent's, which is obviously going to help me in the long term. My opponent here decides to force the issue immediately, which I immediately believe is just a very bad move. My opponent here plays this ridiculous move, bishop to b5. And before this move happened, I thought that it was probably like an equal position where white had a little more not happiness, like comfortability. But after this move in the trade, I started to believe that white actually has like just the winning chances now. Like white has the winning chances. Like now you've given me targets. Like these pawns are targets now. And it to me felt like this was a huge inaccuracy. And now I have all the play in the world, and I thought I was already probably going to win this game, even after seeing this move. My opponent goes queen to d... I go queen to d3, because I'm awesome, and I'm simply targeting the pawn. Maybe a different idea here is to go knight d3, and reposition the knight on b4 or c5 in some lines, but I'm not too sure about that. Instead I go queen d3, hitting the pawn, and basically forcing my opponent to go queen to a5, which makes the most sense. Obviously, he's coming in here with the queen in some lines. He's defending his pawn. And if I play b4, this is actually just a bad move because my opponent tucks his queen in on a4, and these rooks are getting into position, which would be bad for me. And actually, my pawns are the weak ones now. So I can't do that. But either way, I think for a little bit. I was thinking about playing this with rook ac1. But I didn't like here. I'll tell you what I didn't like here. I didn't like that my opponent had this move b4, I thought. And I didn't know if this was good for me. I didn't think it was because I felt like my opponent was undoubling his pawns. Actually, it's very, very good for me because I just missed a move. I just missed queen d2. But can you really blame me? I mean, like knight e4, queen takes b4, takes. It feels like now I have the problems in the position. I don't know. It just doesn't look like a position that I would really like to play with, even if I am up a pawn. Either way, that didn't happen. I simply played the move h3, which I thought, okay, this can't be a bad move. I'm stopping any back rank mates, and life is good. I'm going to put out the rook on the c file next turn, and my opponent goes rook to c7. Simply going for a doubling up on the c file. One of my plans here, by the way, why I was like scared of this move, and with the rook off the a file, I was scared of this move because in this case, if my opponent plays this move, I was thinking about going a4, and I like this idea because now I thought, well, now this pawn can't come forward, and this pawn is a huge weakness. It's a misevaluation of the position, but I just didn't think that my opponent really had enough play here to justify this. Either way, h3, rook c7. Now I go rook f to c1. If he takes, now he's giving me the c file, so I think this is fine. If he plays b4 here, I thought that, okay, I would simply capture and just capture the pawn. So I'm like, okay, well, that sounds like fun. Instead of that, my opponent goes here, obviously. I decide to trade one set of rooks. And after this, I have to think of a plan. And I think of the right plan, which is just incredible. This crazy move that, honestly, I'm very, very proud of this move. I played this nice move, queen to d1, which is the best move in the position. I don't care what the engine says. Actually, the engine slightly prefers queen to f1. Very, very slightly prefers queen to f1. But I thought queen to d1 was better because now I might be coming over into the king side as well. And with the queen on f1, I'm targeting this pawn, but I'm not coming into the queen side, and I'm not defending this diagonal. So I'm like, why would I put my queen on f1? That doesn't make any much sense. And I really like this idea because queen to f1, queen to d1, one of the ideas is that I want the d3 square for my knight and to reposition it to one of these two squares, which I thought was where the knight kind of wanted to be now because my knight's a little bit misplaced on this square. And the other idea is that after queen to d1, now I'm also trying to facilitate my rook coming over to the c file and getting some play because my opponent has back rank issues at the same time. Like there's serious problems for black here. And yeah, I just thought this position was pretty good for me. My opponent goes queen to a4. I have to think for a little bit. I think actually for a decent bit here, trying to figure out what move to play. Obviously this is bad. This is obviously bad because my opponent's going to be able to get to the second rank at some point. Not really, but like this isn't what I want. Like I have to go knight d3, rook here. I get rook c1 here, which is nice. You can't take because of back rank mate, but this is just tricky. I would have had to find all that, and it doesn't really look the most appetizing. Either way, I played the move b3, hitting the queen back after a long think. And why I thought so long was because my opponent has like some ideas of going queen back, and then this square is a little weak that I've highlighted here. But I ended up realizing that actually my opponent's back rank weaknesses are so like bad that I can just play like this and I'm completely fine. So my opponent goes queen a5. I go with my plan of knight to d3. My opponent can't really go here because actually I just played queen e1 and this pin is brutal. Or even rook c1, and I'm probably just better. But either way, knight to e4 is the move chosen. And I think for a good bit, and I end up playing the best move. I play the move f3, which is so cool. And the idea of f3 is that while it looks like my opponent is coming into this square, actually I'm arguing that that square is not the right square for the knight, and my opponent's knight is going to be a huge target on that square. So I'm actually super proud of this. My opponent has to go to c3 now. If he doesn't go to c3, he goes back. He can go forward too, but I don't like this after king f2. This doesn't make much sense. What in the world? I didn't see that move. Oh man, knight h1 check is the move. Of course, if this there's a fork, but I mean I just go king g1. Maybe I go king h2 now. No, I guess this is just a draw, right? Because king f2 is the only move. Okay, I didn't see knight h1 at all. That's brilliant, actually. That's a really brilliant move. I didn't see that one. But yeah, anyway, f3. My opponent goes knight c3, and the position is finally winning for white. There are two moves that win for white. I find the one that isn't as good as the one that's actually good. That's actually the best move. I don't really understand the difference. The two moves are queen e1 and queen d2. Because yeah, to me, queen d2 is more natural because, of course, I'm pinning the queen. I'm also like opening up the rook and stuff. It just seems like the better move. But actually, it's better to go queen e1, I guess, because I'm defending the rook and also defending the back rank. I guess, but I don't really know. I go queen d2. It's still fine. It's still +1. But whatever. I'm still winning here. Queen e1 is like +1.5 though, so a little bit of a small inconsistency, but it's still totally fine. My opponent goes b6, which makes sense because of course you're trying to defend the queen, but that of course gives me time to now play rook c1, and now I'm pinning him on both sides. And I'm sure what he thought here was that he would have this move knight to e2 check, but this doesn't work because at the end of the line my rook is defended by my knight, which is very nice. Maybe this wasn't what he thought, but I thought this was probably what he missed, because that my knight was defending. That's what I missed for a while because I was a little bit worried about knight to e2 check. By the way, rook c1, and I'm already winning the game. There's nothing he can do. One trick that I saw here for him was that he could maybe take this pawn, but I realized it doesn't work here because if rooks take c3, queen a1, I come back with the rook, which is nice. Of course, he would be attacking both, but no, I'm able to come back with the rook, and it gets very tactical, but the tactical complications always follow me. My opponent doesn't do any of that. My opponent doesn't try to save the game at all. He goes to the move f6 because he has to. He has to do something here because I'm simply threatening. To like eventually win the game somehow. I'm threatening this in some lines. Like if he doesn't play f6. I don't know, what's a random move for him? Rook here. There's no, because of knight e2. Okay, it's tricky, but I guess in the long run I'm threatening queen b2 and this, right? Yeah, I guess that's what I'm threatening. Yeah, so queen b2 and that, I would have found that in the game, but whatever. Rook c1, my opponent goes f6, which I didn't really think did much because it just allows me to do whatever I want. I wanted to go with the knight to b4, but I realized that knight e2 is a big issue, and so I had to figure out a replacement. I wanted to move my king out of the way, so then my king wouldn't be in a checking position of knight e2. So I can't go king f2 because this would lose the game to knight e4, opening up an attack on the queen and attacking with the king and the queen. So of course, if takes, I would be losing with this. So I have to go king f1, which I think is the best move. Simply moving the king out of the way, and now there is really nothing he can do to stop me from playing knight b4, which I really liked. I really like this idea in knight b4 because I thought that I was just winning in many lines after knight b4, or even queen b2. Like I was looking at this line too, queen b2, and then I would get I would just be winning the knight in the long run. King f1, my opponent goes e5, and I realize I can go queen b2 and eventually win the game, but at the same time, I wasn't really down with all the complications. I wasn't sure of everything. So I end up seeing a very nice forcing line from this move. I see the rest of the game from this move here. My opponent definitely doesn't see the rest of the game because he missed this, but d takes e5, f takes e5, knight takes e5. My opponent here definitely thought for a while and thought that after the move queen takes a3 and rook takes here, he would have a fork of the king and this, and then I would lose, and he would be up in exchange. Which is correct, except for the fact that after rook takes c3, queen to a1, and king to a2, and queen takes c3, I have a checkmate. And the game ends like this. My opponent allows me to play a checkmate, which is very, very nice. There's nothing he can do. Either he goes rook f7, gets mated, or he does what he does in the game, which is king f8, and gets mated very, very nicely like this with queen d8 checkmate, which is kind of cool because my knight defends this square, and that's how I win this game. This was a very, very fun game. I'm honestly kind of winning a lot more games recently, which is pretty good for me. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe. Don't let these YouTubers tell you to do. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.